This episode is sponsored in part by PTZOptics. Why hire a camera operator when the control is in your hands? Visit PTZOptics.com for more information. And by NewTek, makers of the TriCaster TC1. Stun your viewers, not your accountant. Visit newtek.com for more information.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Salt Talk, brand new for 2023. We're excited to be here and talk about that painful word that every pastor, board member hates to hear, spending money. So today we've got a good show for you guys. Joining me, we brought back the Emmy Award winner. Now, he has actually gotten another Emmy since the last time. Like, he just keeps getting Emmys. Like, I don't know, Jeff, are they handing them out? I mean, where do I sign up?
Amazon.
Amazon.
Amazon.com.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's where
Jeff
it's
Fitzgerald.
great. It's great to be back in the seat. I feel like the weatherman filling in for the news anchor Greg Terry, who's away. So I'll be doing the the traffic and weather over the Ohio Valley with the cold front moving in. And
yeah, actually, Greg was going to be here too with us. We were going to do the three of us, but because Greg's like, man, you always have Jeff on when I'm not here. He's like, what's up with that? So he's actually over in the Ukraine helping bring supplies to the front end of everything.
He's a fantastic journalist, Steve. He's doing things other people are not doing.
He is on the front lines. So if you're interested in what he's doing, you can always check him out. You guys know where to find him. But it's great to have you here. Today's going to be an interesting day because, like I said, churches hate to spend money. That's like the big thing nobody wants to hear. They don't want to spend money. Well, frankly, I don't want to spend money either, but we have to, right? So,
well, I don't want to get off on a big tangent, but I'll tell you this much. The Bible does talk a lot about money and our stewarding of it. And we know that these things are important to build the kingdom, to fund the initiatives that really help shape the world into making it a better place. But, in my corporate world, I have a saying that I share sometimes with clients, which is don't spend your success trying to save money, because if you don't apply enough of whatever is needed to confront the challenge that you've got, and especially if it's a major challenge, and I would count technology as being incredibly important in this moment, because we know that streaming is now opening the door to millions of new people. It's one of those conversations that I think that it's worth having at a real sober level, as to what are we really trying to do as a church, and is the money the issue or is the vision the issue? Because if you don't have the vision, the money's not going to come up.
well, yeah, and the Bible says if without vision, your people perish. So
Right.
my people perish. So we want to get into that a little bit today because I think I caught Jeff off guard when I said, this year, I had already prepped the board. We usually do our beginning of the year board meeting, and I said, hey, plan on spending between $5,000 and $7,000. We need to upgrade our computers. Now, this is the first time we're upgrading them in 10 years. So I upgraded
Can I
them.
do the Home Alone?
So we want to get into that a little bit. That was something that was big on my plate this year that we're going into. And so I want to ask the chat room, are you in a position right now where you don't know what you should upgrade? I think that's where this subject kind of stemmed from, because I was talking to a bunch of people, Jeff, recently that work in a house of worship, and they're like, hey, what do you think we should upgrade? Should we go to 4K? Should we upgrade all of our TV monitors in the sanctuary? Because if we go to 4K cameras, well, we got to upgrade our monitors to 4K. Well, which then that requires us to upgrade all of our computer monitors to 4K, and that requires us to upgrade
Right.
our computers to 4K. So it's like a snowball effect. And I basically told him, I said, you can get 4K cameras now and still stream 1080
Mm-hmm.
and to take it in strides, right? Like maybe this
Right.
year you're spending it on the cameras, next year you're doing the monitors, and 4K monitors. I don't know if you've upgraded yours. I started upgrading mine. They're not that expensive anymore. They're around $125 for
No, they are
25 inch.
they're incredibly affordable. And I would say, and your example was perfect, right? If you start with the cameras, to me the big advantage of 4K for any church is that if you have a situation where you want to zoom in fairly far and you're shooting in you're streaming in 1080, like if you're using vmix or something, you can use that extra quality to be able to get closer without necessarily really being closer and still have, decent quality. And that's an equation I don't think is all that common. But the thing is, if you do start with the 4K camera, which is what I'm using right now, and I know that's, what you're using, you can still see that over 1080, the quality is better and the color is better. And there's all these other things. But to get into the whole ecosystem of let's go down the technology line of why we should do something, I go back to what is the bigger why in all of it? What are you really trying to do? Are you trying to present the pulpit every Sunday and that's it? Are you trying to do performances and things like that? Or maybe are you trying to build what would look like almost like a TV show a little bit, where instead of the pre-roll on Sunday morning, you've got two great people and they're saying, hey man, it is an awesome day. Even among the challenges we all have, it's an awesome day. And how can we pray for you? And today our pastor is going to talk about this. And you've got some testimonies rolled in or something like that. So to me, before you get into all the shiny knobs that you and I are totally all into, you gotta get back to really what's the why in all of that.
I agree. And George in the chat room here, he says, every year a different part of tech should be upgraded. And I tend to agree with him. Like, if we don't want to get into the whole nuts and bolts of, knobs and switches and stuff, but I would agree, because I think it prevents you having this giant tech bill at the beginning of a year. And that's what I like to do. And that's something that I brought up with our board and the senior pastors. And I'm in a good position in the church. When I say we need to upgrade something, they know it's like we've expanded every option with that machine or whatever the device is, that I've tried to duct tape that thing to keep it alive as long as I possibly could. It's time to upgrade. And I like to upgrade them, Jeff. Anything I do, like if I'm doing cameras, I like to do them all at once, because then I know in the year of 2022, we upgraded all of our cameras to the PTZOptics cameras. 2023, we upgraded all of our computers, right? So it in documenting these things, we know, right, approximately how long they should last and how much use you should get out of it. But so I'm going to throw you a little curve here. When I said we haven't upgraded them in 10 years, I've been at the church almost 17 years. When I first came on board, we bought computers. We bought a 2009 Mac Pro that was the top of the line that you could get at the time. That was our streaming machine. Well, even though it's still a beefy machine and still can handle it, you can't put any of the new operating systems on it. And so therefore, any of the new software like Pro Presenter and things like that, they don't work. Wirecast doesn't work on it anymore. And we used to use that to feed our monitors, because now it's M2 and the latest and greatest Intel all the way up to M2. So it's time to upgrade, and we're going to use it as a server. So all of our Macs, we tend to buy them at the highest version that we could possibly get for them. And then they last almost, when I say 10 years, I was probably short by like 4 or 5 months. It's probably like 9 years and like 6 months or something like that. But pretty darn close to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, the Mac is an equation part of this, an element of this, where you do get a lot more life out of them. But you're right. Apple kind of bogs everything down. They limit the amount of operating system upgrades over a span of years and things. But I love what you're talking about, where you'll do one thing over another, because if you can imagine having an old capture card from 2015 on one camera and a Canon Vixia that's HD, but then you bought, a better capture card, but it's a different type. Maybe it's in a PCI slot in another machine, and then you've got a third machine. These things get so complicated to keep up. Then when it comes time to really start thinking strategically about like a holistic upgrade of your studio or of your production facility, you really start getting bogged down going, oh my gosh, we got all these things. And if I move this, it's going to change all these other things. So it's better to be intentional about it from the get-go. And I think that's just a smart idea, is to do what you can and buy ahead as far as you can as well.
Yeah, you have to do that within reason. So I'm just going to take you a trip down memory lane. Here is that Canon Vixia camera that Jeff just mentioned. This was a camera I used to use in the studio, and we used this at the church for the longest time. We had 5 of these at the church. Yeah, and they were inexpensive too. We had 5 of these at the church, and I had about 8 of them here in the studio, and I've given them away since then, people wanting to learn how to stream, because Jeff, gets expensive with those HDMI capture cards, man. Like, so now you can get some of these cheap Chinese capture cards for like $15, and they might last you 2 years, and then they overheat and die. But for somebody starting out streaming, they were like awesome. Thank you so much for giving the camera. So
Completely, yeah.
I always keep one of my old cameras just kind of as a walk down memory lane as to where I started. And I don't know, it's just a sentimental thing for me, but
Yeah, and the cool thing is that like what you're talking about is that what we think of, because listen, we're more tech focused than a lot of other folks. It's part of what our industry is, what we work in professionally and vocationally. But for somebody who has nothing, but they've got a passion in their heart, they've seen it, and they're like, I want to do that for my small church of 30 people, or whatever it might be. Man, that's awesome, because what you're doing is it goes well beyond the technology. The technology has nothing to do with the end result of somebody hearing something that is going to change their life. And I think if we keep that at top level, all this other stuff becomes a lot more manageable, because while we could do this and we could do that, and we could have like a zip line with a guy on it with a camera, it's not necessary, right? The real end goal has to be the end goal the whole time, in my opinion.
no, and we're seeing now, we're coming out of the pandemic era. We're seeing a lot more people saying, it was convenient to hold, a Bible study or a mosque or something, from home, be able to do this remotely, Jeff, over Zoom or anything. But what they're noticing is something we have stated time and time and time again. It was just like a meeting I just recently had earlier today. People like Zoom. They think it's awesome, but they want to step up and get that quality. And that's what we preached for how long in the broadcast world, that quality is going to overshadow the noise. And that's where people are at right now. They want to take it another step. They want these studies that they're doing at home, Bible studies. They want them, like you said, TV. They want that high quality. And a lot of them like, well, where do I start? How do I get moving on this?
Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, you have to have a good level of quality no matter what you're doing. Camera's got to be in focus. The colors have got to be correct. You got to have decent lighting. And of course, the most important thing of all of it is you've got to have audio that somebody can actually understand. I think all of us have watched something from time to time in, some older church, and the gentleman is saying something very nice, but it sounds like you're at Wrigley Field. It's like, hello, welcome, right? And it's just, things can be a little bit more annoying there. So yeah, all these little things, in aggregate equal a much, much broader experience for the end user. And so quality is everything. Absolutely.
So George also says in the chat room, he says, I started with iPods as cameras, and now I use PTZOptics. I know a lot of churches that used iPhones, iPads, iPod touches back when they were making them. So that's not a surprise, George. I mean, they're decent cameras. They're not like,
yeah.
I actually would rather see people using that, Jeff, than a cheap webcam that's built into their PC laptop that they're trying to flex the laptop around and trying to get a shot.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
a great option.
And the iPhone is very unique because the quality is really incredible. I mean, quick sidebar, the PSA that last year was nominated for an Emmy and won. There's a shot in there of these two firemen that I did in slow motion on my iPhone, and it blended beautifully with all the other high-end gear that we're using. And so you got the ability in your pocket to do something great. But the thing about an iPhone is you got to get close enough for it to make sense, right? If it's like you're in the last row of the Philadelphia Eagles stadium, looks a little different than when you're up a little bit closer. So just be strategic about where you place it so you can hear and see better. And yeah, absolutely. If you start with that, that's a start.
So one thing I wanted to bring up here, I wanted to show, like a lot of houses of worship, a lot of churches, you guys are always looking for a way, and you're like, man, I really don't have a lot of money. I don't want to do a static camera. Everybody does static cameras, but I only have a budget for, say, one camera. And I actually had somebody send me an email about using a GoPro. And Jeff, with a GoPro, you can actually go live from the GoPro now with a lot of the new ones. I have the Hero, whatever the 10, I think is the latest one. I think I have a 9. So I have one under that. What you need to do is go out and get yourself one of these gimbals. You can attach it to a tripod. It has feet here that fold out, like if you want to carry it around. It has control on it here, so you can pan and zoom the digital zoom inside of it. You can actually tilt the lens and whatnot, and it has like your normal gimbal access on it. And I only paid $60, I think, for this. This was very inexpensive. to use with a GoPro. I take this when I go to trade shows for the different things that I'm involved in, and I like to go to like the outdoor stuff or the video game stuff. But I also take one of these, and this is where you can get a little bit more pricey. This is, your DJI. I think this is an Osmo. I forget the model number of it, but again, this is one you can take this bottom off. It unscrews and put it on a tripod. It also has the ability to maneuver your phone around. You can actually tilt the gimbal, adjust the gimbal, and I mentioned this to a congregation. I said, have one of the youth kids. They get creative on TikTok. Have them walk around with it and get these creative shots, Jeff, of the worship team, of the pastor preaching, and with the gimbal, the shot's going to be solid. Most of these iPhones and Android devices, YouTube Live, you can go live from the phone. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, on a high end, studio setup with a computer,
absolutely, yeah,
get one of these and go, right?
Those are so powerful, Steve. And you triggered something in me with the word TikTok, because I don't have it on my phone anymore, because there's been a lot of conversations about them, taking more data and information than maybe you would want. But it is a really strong platform for the youth. And if you have people who are younger, who are 18, 19, 20 or whatever in your congregation, how cool would it be to help them move into TikTok, if that's where they're natively hanging out anyway, and help them build a mission where they're doing some really innovative work. To me, TikTok, the way that they've done it with short form video and creative video is really crazy addictive and really, really creative. And so there might be some opportunities there for the next generation to create some messaging there that could really transform people online. And a lot of people are doing it already. A lot of people doing some really cool stuff on TikTok.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, I try to encourage the youth. I'm going to have to pull up at some point, maybe in a future show, when my daughter, she had a sleepover. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but she had a sleepover with a bunch of her middle school friends. Now, most of them, they're 14 years old. They're they come down here, they'll play the arcades that I have here, and then one time they were back here and they were pretending to talk into my mic. This was a couple of years ago at a party. And they thought they were in big trouble because I had come down and they were back here, just kind of pretending like they were newscasters, right? Just sitting here. They weren't hurt nothing. I says, "You guys want to broadcast?" And they're like, their eyes got like as big as softballs, and they were like, "Can we?" And I was, and they had it all planned out. Like, they sat there. Some of them went into the other room and they were like, "Okay, you're going to say this, and you're going to be our weather girl, and you're going to be our sports." And they
That's
of
so
course,
cool.
they're being goofy, right? They're like, "It's raining cats and dogs," and the one girl wanted nothing to do with being on camera. But I'll tell you what, I sat with her for 10 minutes and she was switching on the TriCaster, and I was kind of looking over her shoulder just in case she got stuck. But she switched their whole hour production.
That is amazing.
Okay, so these kids are willing to learn. The long story short, I was actually impressed. Like, the parents were watching, they're like, "They did all this with that equipment?" I was like, "Yeah." And I just kind of was there in case they needed assistance or whatever. I mean, they were bringing each other like remote callers on the phones, because with NDI, right, you can bring them, and it was nothing to them. They were like, "Can we borrow your gimbal?" Like, they have gimbals, so they know what, right? So they know what to do with that. So I just thought it was cool, because I think a lot of these houses of worship, if they would incorporate the youth kids, you would see your production level step up, because they know what they want to see and how to shoot it because of what they see. It's
Bet.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree. I think that, for where I learned from, obviously my mom was a producer, but most of what I learned was on my own, watching TV, and began looking at it a little bit more with a critical eye. Like, how did they do that? Right. And you look at the kids today who are 12 years old and they're making Star Wars films in the backyard. There's no longer a barrier between the elites who have all the gifts, when in reality, a lot of it was skill and not always just the gifts. And I think you're making a big mistake by not bringing in the younger generation, because number one, you're giving them a purpose for the media that they already like. You're giving them a purpose for the technology they already are clinging to, and you're giving them a mission on top of it. And then you give them the ability and the free permission to be able to build some sort of ministry type movement within your congregation. That's incredible. right? And then what happens, like you said, when you're 17, 18, 19, they don't freak out like the people who only do it once every 3 months. They're like, no, we're going to hit this button, hit that button, and they have it. And I go back to David. You look at what he did at 17 and all these things. And so I think there's a lot there that I think a lot of congregations just kind of gloss over and dismiss sometimes.
Well, and I think, if you're wondering what type of gear that you need to get for the year, obviously you have your maintenance that you need to do. Like if your mixing board is on its way out, I mean, that takes precedence over other things. But again, I'm going back to the youth. Talk to them. Like if you have all the cameras you need and everything's good, the computers are good, talk to the youth kids that are helping you or you want them to help, and they'll come up with innovative ideas on things you could get. I mean, just getting like a GoPro with a gimbal could change how your stuff is filmed. Like Jeff, you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said, well, what are you looking for? What type of service are you looking to do? Are you trying to get away from just the static single shot? Or are you trying to, step it up a little bit, make it a little bit more like a TV show? Giving a youth kid a gimbal with a GoPro where he's filming the music, the worship band, and they can cut to it and stuff, or baptismals or baby dedications, or we've had people renew their wedding vows right there in the service, 50 years, and they read their vows for like 10 minutes, and but those types of things, right? To have that intimate experience with somebody with a camera. I mean, you got to get past that small mindset of this is church. We have to keep the cameras hidden. We got to keep them at a distance. We got to.
Absolutely.
Who made that rule? I want to know.
That rule is just archaic because it's from 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And there's a couple things that come to mind with this. Number one, there is a difference between interior media and exterior media, right? Because you could just take that same kid and have him go out and be with other adults. When I say kid, I'm obviously talking about, late teens and things like that.
Sure.
But they could go and film the soup kitchens and maybe ask somebody who has been temporarily displaced about, how is their life changed since coming into this center that's been able to add some small benefit to their life, and begin telling stories. And I really believe that the really where the paradigm is in the church is that the older you are in the church, but in terms of how many years you've been in it, and especially if you're a leader, that the more grounded you're going to be in putting your feet down and drawing lines in the sand, saying we cannot do any more than this. And what that does is that will date you to the point where somebody would look at what you're putting out and literally be like, well, that's from 1980. I can't connect with that. You take the younger kids and maybe they want to do something very different, or maybe they're standing, and I know I'm not even suggesting this, but maybe they're standing behind you while you're preaching and people can see the audience and you, but the pastor's actually turning around. So he's speaking to the camera with the audience behind him.
Yep.
Whatever it might be, something very different. We may look at that like, oh, those are rules. The robot alarms are going off. Can't do that. But it might be the very cool thing that gets somebody's attention where it's different. And I think we put ourselves way too hard in concrete when we're not supposed to be. We build on concrete. We don't live in it, so.
Well, we have some examples of some of the gear that you may want to look at for this year. And Jeff, not to put you on the spot here or anything, but do you have your sliding camera? Do you have that set up?
Actually, I don't. It had an issue where the motor burned out. I left it on for a little too long.
Okay, because I know you used to keep
that.
Well, that was something that I would suggest, because I wish if he would have had it set up, he could have showed you. But you put the camera on a slide, and I'll see if I can pull one up on Amazon. And it's just you had it going at a slow pace, but it just gave that element of movement, right? I mean, that was the dynamic you were going for. And if some of these churches take a box camera, we have these box cameras. I use this out on the road. I put this on there. I call it a dump shot. I put it on there, and it just moves ever so slow, and it gets the band or whatever I'm shooting at the time I was doing graduation. So it was just panning the stage at a very slow movement, but we could dump to it while we were getting some of the other camera shots set up.
Oh, and it adds so much beauty and so much dynamic visual difference to whatever you're doing. One of my favorite destinations is IHOP KC. It's basically, and the name is a little interesting. It's International House of Prayer, not pancakes. but it's a 24-hour worship channel that started in September of 1999, and they've not stopped. They have musicians every 2 hours come in. It's been that way 24/7. A lot of prayer, a lot of cool stuff. But they really rely a lot on sliding cameras. They rely a lot on automated PTZ to be able to move and share things. And on Friday nights, it gets a little bit more live and dynamic. There's more people and it's more energy and things like that. But the sliding camera can add a completely new dimension to anything that you're doing. And if you really look at the overwhelming majority of media today, it's moving. It's not stationary. When it's stationary, it's almost that it's there for a reason, which is, hey, important point. You need to listen to this.
Yeah.
Right. But the in-betweens have that nice visual dynamic to them, a lot of movement.
And this is like one that I have. Mine's not a super expensive one. It's battery powered. It has a remote, a little under $300, but it has the ability, you can set it on a desk. Jeff, you can put it on a tripod. I have the extension arms, so I couldn't put it on a tripod to stabilize the ends.
Cool.
But you could take a DSLR, a camcorder. I've even put the PTZOptics cameras on it, the box camera, and it works great. And it'll go down. You set the parameter where you want it to stop, and then as soon as it hits that stopping point, it goes back up. And you can set it really fast, or you can set it really slow. And I use them a lot when I'm shooting shots. A lot of times with product shots, it looks really cool. It looks like you're kind of going down on it, where it's very slow and subtle. Got that like flyover effect to it. Really, really awesome. And like I said, they have different versions of it. You can use an iPhone or an Android device. But these are something that I would recommend if you're looking for new gear and you don't need to upgrade any of your stuff, but you want that different effect. This is definitely something you want to invest in.
It is.
And wouldn't you say you probably should stay away from the ones that are like $100 to $200, because they're probably going to have some issues. Maybe the bands break.
I mean, yeah, that actually is a really good lead-in, because when you're in ministry, wherever it is, you're always looking at the bottom line. So you immediately look at the last 10% of whatever's out there, thinking that the top 90 is probably too expensive or not worth it. But in things like this, you have to pay attention to the durability, which, I have the one that I purchased was a GVM 2 years ago, and I would have it on doing a lot of movement and things. And sometimes I would let it run because I would just, I'm in and out of the studio and I'm doing other stuff. And what happened with mine is that the motor burned out about 3 weeks ago, and I paid for a new one for $50 and had that refunded a day later. And they go, we don't have them right now. There's that shipping backlog going on. And so if you really look at the price of what these things roll when they're really, really good products, they're $3,000, right? So you have to kind of figure out where's that middle ground. But I think the newer looked like a really nice one, and it was a wireless control. If I saw that right, it was wireless.
Yes. Yeah, they have some wireless ones. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to be able to have the ability to do that. Well, you don't have to get up and you keep standing up and trying to make adjustments if you're sitting at your desk with all your good stuff. But yeah, I think you do. You can buy affordable, but not like so cheap that when you get it, it's already broken. It's kind of the way I look at it.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying go out and spend $1,000 if you don't have it, but I've just found by reading reviews and seeing different things on there that a lot of the ones, because I was in that same boat, Jeff, I was looking at it, I was going, okay, I'm going to go get like, $100 one. But a lot of people complained and said that, the bands will rip on them, because some of them have like mine has a track band that goes around.
That's what the one I had. And those are the things that wear out the most, is that they start slipping.
They wear out. And the other thing is I bought the arms for it. My arms to stabilize it to a tripod were $80 for two arms.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I saw with some of them is they don't get tight enough because of the force of it. If you get the cheaper ones, the $20 or $30 ones. So I bought the $80 ones, and I don't regret doing it, because it keeps it solid. I mean, this is investment. You have probably a $2,000 camera. On top of it, the last thing you want it to do is fall or get damaged on this thing, right?
Yep. And that's actually really a great point, because you do have something that is of a lot more value, but you're putting on something that is a lot less value. And it's always that small, thing we don't think about, that small, minute part. Oh, that little plastic piece broke, but yet the whole camera came crashing down. And it's like, I had that happen in Colorado last year on a PSA shoot. My $3,000 camera fell because the tripod, while it was carbon fiber, the piece that I'd mounted it to was plastic, and I didn't realize it when I purchased. It was a little camera plate. There was a piece of plastic in it. and wind came, and there you go. And so, perfect example.
I think every broadcaster has had that at some period. Mine was 8 months old. It was a Canon HF G4 H. It was the last of the 1080p. It looks like the HA G44K that I have. Which is a $2,500 camcorder. The other one was probably about $1,800 or so. And I had it on a cheap tripod. I know better than to do that, and I did. And the washer inside that holds the head from, like, so you can tip it up and down and whatnot, and you lock it. The washer was so compressed because of how cheap it was. It tipped it, which shifted the weight and caused the tripod to go over, and it smashed the touchscreen window that opens. So the camera still works, but you have no way of changing any settings. You have no way of seeing what's on the camera unless you hook it to a capture card. And when I sent it back to Canon, they wanted almost $900 to fix it. Well, for that, I'm just going to buy a new camcorder. I mean, that's exactly where I'm at. So I got it back, and I ended up buying a 4K one. Like I said, I think it's the HFG 40 is what I have. But whatever the comparison was at 1080, that's the other one I had. But yeah, it's a bugger, man. So the point in case is, you know, in your house of worship and you're watching those pennies, don't skimp on the little things like tripods. If you're sitting here listening to this right now and you're going, I just bought $30 Walmart tripods and we got PTZOptics cameras that are $2,500. Let me tell you something. Get rid of them. Get rid of those tripods. Jeff will tell you. Get rid of those tripods. Go spend $100. Get a nice free flowing tripod. Put them on, or something solid that you know is not. Listen, $100 versus $30. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but if it prevents you from damaging your camera, you just heard two examples.
Yep, absolutely.
Of that happening.
I mean, yeah, absolutely, Steve. I mean, if you think about it, if you're going to spend, let's say you're going to spend $400 on something, but there's a model that might be $700 that would be twice the quality. The delta between that spend is now just $300, right? We look at it like, oh my God, 700 versus 4. But the more that you're able to buy ahead and buy at a better value, better quality, not crazy above what you need, but the more you're able to do that, the less iterations you got to go through having to replace it or have maintenance on it and manage it. So that takes a lot of work out of the future when you buy better and you buy more advanced technology, because it's going to do the work for you longer. And so I just feel like if you're buying at the bare bones, and obviously when you don't have the money, you don't have it. And this doesn't change that. You get what will work and you do the best you can with it. But if you have the ability to buy a little bit farther down the line at a little higher price, that little extra you're putting on top of what you're already going to spend anyway will get you sometimes twice as far down the road without all the problem.
Hence us getting almost 10 years with the Max that we bought.
Right.
For everything. So, you know, we had that ability, but that's the other thing I want to stress too, because Jeff's going to talk about another product that he has that works with NDI that, you know, maybe is an opportunity for you guys. But one of the things I always tend to do when I know that these, because let's face it, us as tech guys or whoever's running these computers, you know when they start slowing down, you know when software stops working, or they send you the email and said, hey, you know, it's not going to work after this period of time, and you just kind of neglect it. Those are the times I make notes, and when I go to a board meeting, I let them know, say, hey, I know this is only March of 2022, but I'm going to come to you in January of 2023 when we have our first of the year board meeting, and I'm going to present to you that 6 of our computers need upgrading, which is between $5,000 and $7,000. So just be prepared for that when we're budgeting the money, and know that, hey, this is a possible expense that's coming up. And I think that's also part of doing your due diligence as somebody that's working in that environment. The senior pastor, the board members, most of them aren't tech savvy. There are a few that are, but they're relying on you, the volunteer who's using this every week, week in and week out, knowing that, hey, if you have software that needs to be upgraded on the licensing, you know, ProPresenter every year, right? These are the things that you can help soften the blow, if you will. Coming from a pastor, I can tell you, it softens the blow when you know in advance that you can prepare for it. You can, you know, you're going, oh, wow, you know, we don't really have any major expenses. So it's a lot easier to say, yeah, go ahead, go spend $7,000 and get new computers, because we don't have any major expenses, because we were prepared. We knew you were going to come and ask about it. Jeff, I think that's I think that's the
Yeah.
way you should almost go.
Yeah, well, no, I think it is. I mean, again, you have to have the funds to be able to do it with, and sometimes there's a stretch in all of that. But I mean, for example, I was back in 1985, I was an Amiga user for 12 years. Then I got into the Mac, and only in 2020 did I go the whole PC route because of the fact that Mac had lost, I think, a lot of technological advancement, and it was a lot more money for what I could build on my own. April 2020, the machine I'm using right now, I built, I went overboard, crazy overboard, but I built a 24 core AMD Threadripper with 128 gigs of memory and a big graphics card. And here we are coming up now, and 3 years later, and it's not even beginning to show signs of being in the middle of the road or behind in a lot of ways. Now, that was a lot of money up front, but the thing is, I have peace of mind the whole time that I'm not like, oh, is today the day that it's going to decide to clog up and want to reboot and all this kind of stuff. I mean, things happen. But when you can buy ahead, you're buying peace of mind, and I think that's really critical to remember. When it's possible and when it's reasonable, I think it's the right thing to do.
And I think if you know this in advance, I think that helps get to that point where you can buy more. And I know my senior pastor, he would say he always would say to me, he would say, okay, he'd say, so what is the top of the line machine in this because it's a Mac. Okay, so if you're going to get a Mac Mini, because now with the M2 Pros, they're powerful. I mean, they're more powerful than the Mac Pros were.
Yep.
What's the top of the line going to cost me? And it might be like, we'll just say $2,500. I don't know. I didn't spec it out, so just bear with me. And he'll say, well, what's the baseline? $599. Well, we don't want the baseline. And he'll say, if I spend the $2,500, how much time am I going to get? And I'm like sitting there going, well, that's 24 core plus hyper threading plus 32 gigs of RAM. And it's technology, but it's slowed down to the point, Jeff, right now, just like you said with your machine. If you get quality components, they'll last and last. It really boils down to software, discontinuing support for older chipsets and things. And I'm like, you could get 6-7 years. If we end up getting more, hey, count it as a blessing that we,
Right.
But we can't control.
That's right.
We can't control the technology people out there.
No, and I think one of the things we got to be really careful of is being the tech nerds on the Starship Enterprise and trying to explain to a pastor what hyperthreading is.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's kind of like him trying to teach and all these other things that we're like, whoa, that's a little too much. But the thing is to put it in the words to your leadership that really matter, which is number one, pastors, leadership. How important is it that we really that we don't just put the stream out there because we think it's a neat thing to do for the old lady who may be bedridden, but how important are these people that are watching who will never come into our building, but they're still wanting to know what we're talking about? They're still interested in what might be shared, right? How important are they? Well, obviously they're going to say they're important. Well, number two is how important is it to have peace of mind that we're able to do this consistently and dedicated every week in a manner that with better hardware, we may make it easier for our volunteers to be able to produce something that's worth watching. And so again, it goes back to the why, right? It's like when we start with the why, this is important for our greater congregation outside the walls of our church, our external ministry. And then it's how do we build the right gear that makes it easy for us to be able to do this consistently for a long period of time. And when you get those two parts in play, then it comes back to, well, you guys are the tech guys, better than me. We want to do it at this level.
That's
what
right.
Can we get for that?
No, you're 100% right. And it doesn't matter if it's Mac or PC. I mean, my mobile rig that I use is a PC. It's actually the old live to air machine. But for what I need it for remote production, it's top of the line. I mean, it's a beast. So I don't want it to be like, well, Mac, maybe I should get a Mac because it's going to last longer. That's not what we're saying. I think we've gotten to the point where it used to be a difference. There used to be a dramatic difference between a Mac and a PC as far as performance goes. But nowadays, you can build a PC as long as you're going to put quality of components. I'm not talking about going and getting the Walmart special for $5.99 off the shelf and expecting it to last 5-6 years because you'd be lucky if you get 24 months out of it. I'm just being realistic here.
Right.
If you're just going to surf the web and check your email for the church office, that $5.99 PC is going to be the bee's knees. But when you get into stuff like you're using ProPresenter and you're using live streaming software, whether it be free like OBS or vMix or Wirecat, whatever you're using, you got to put in the money. And Jeff, honestly, you're looking at probably between $3,000 and $5,000 for a streaming machine that's going to withstand the abuse you're going to throw at it for trying to do multiple cameras, powering out external displays, those overflow rooms,
You bet. Absolutely.
4K editing, all this stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you're right. When I bought mine back in 2020, I was faced with buying an iMac Pro with what they called it at the time that had 2-year-old chips in it. The M1s had not come out or anything like that. So it's always one goes a little bit faster than the other, and they kind of go up the ladder against each other. I still have Macs because I love Mac as well. But in terms of buying something like that, you've got to buy it at a level where it's going to be able to not only work for the current but work for the future, right? Because if the load and the vision stayed the same over 5 years, you get a lot more out of it. But like you said, it's like, hey, let's add a ceiling cam, or some crazy different thing, or let's add this, or let's add that, or let's, like you said, we need more outputs. You're taxing a machine that wasn't built for all that, and so you have to buy into the future.
Yeah, and I think too with buying into we say buying into the future. Just to be clear, you can never future proof. I mean, these are just estimates. I was fortunate; we were able to get the time out of it as we need, but we started seeing bottlenecks as we were feeding extra screens. And one of the things I got approved last year, we had the funds set aside. The senior pastor needed a new laptop. His MacBook Pro was from 2007, I want to say. It was one of the first second-gen aluminum ones, if you remember, with all the screws around it and everything. It wasn't even unibody. And he only used it for his BibleSoft. So he's like, well, let's just order a laptop. That's where his mind goes. And I'm going, okay, well, we got to make sure that Parallels is up to date because you run BibleSoft, which is running Windows only. So I got to make sure that can run Windows 11 because that's the only way I can get a license. We don't have a Windows 10 license because you're still on Windows. I think he was on Windows Vista or he was on Windows 7, one of the two. I forget. So we have to look at this, right? Well, I sat here, and this was part of my thing. I didn't do my due diligence because he owned BibleSoft. Here I come to find out, and this is for you guys out there, BibleSoft is out of business. The owner came in January 1st. There's the recording is on, and this is the top of the line Bible software for pastors and teachers and scholars and everything that people use.
Wow.
There's a recording on their service line that says, yeah, we came into work and the owner, we don't know if he's selling the company or what. He just told us we don't have a job anymore.
Wow. That's just
so
wow.
Right. So then I had to switch gears and go, okay, we got this new laptop. He needs a Bible program. So I went with eSword, which is open source, kind of like the OBS of Bible programs. You can buy add-on Bibles for it, like, the New King James and different ones that, that support. So we ended up doing that. But there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? So when we got this approved last year, the M2 chips, if you remember, were supposed to come out for the MacBook Pros. Well, they didn't bring them out. They only brought them for the Mac Minis. And I said, I refuse to buy a 1.5-year-old M1 chip on a new laptop. So we waited, and I said, I've got good intel. It's coming by April. Well, they just announced it last week or the week before, the M2. So we ended up getting him an M2 Pro, and that thing flies. But there again, that's where the pastor goes, and he knows that I'm watching this stuff as the guy, the tech guru, if you will. I'm trying to get the most bang for their buck. I want them to have the latest and greatest, so that way it lasts longer, right? Like
that's right, yeah.
Like you weren't.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the the old story in the Bible about the armor bearer who was always trying to care for his leader. That's what we're a steward. We're supposed to do that with whatever we're doing, and so I think it's really important to be able to pick the right pieces of equipment and have the right vision in front of it. And then, let the leadership decide at what level they want to go through that again, and whether it's a year from now or 5 years, and you really just have to kind of lay it out the best you can. But remember, put the why in there first. What is all that about? And that will definitely help.
So this year with Salt Talk, we want to do some different things. I think next month what we're going to do is I've been testing this with my gaming show that I do every week, and that's live call-ins. I have a Google Voice number that I'm going to try to do next month when we do the show, where you guys can call in. I know there's people here in the chat, and sometimes people are just listening, but maybe there's a certain question or something that us, the panel, can answer, and if we don't know, we're just going to tell you we don't know, but we can try to find an answer for you. Have you call in and ask a question. or leave a voicemail that we can get back with. The other thing is we're going to bring in some different guests, I guess you could say. We want to have some different people coming in and talking about some of the products that they have that they use. One of which I'm going to pull up here in just a second here is a product that I'm going to be setting up and doing a review here on in a few weeks here. And this is my upgraded Solo Pro from LiveView. This is what I use, Jeff, as my go-to for remote streaming on location. I hook this up to the output of my vMix machine in my rack that I have, or if I'm going to do a run and gun situation with a single camera. But now that they have the Pro, there's a lot of really cool features with it, like even like a telecom system where you can actually talk to your camera operator through it. So there's
Awesome.
a lot of cool things here that I haven't even dived into it yet. But if you guys haven't seen it or you want to check it out, we're going to try to have the folks from LiveView on, but you can go to LiveView. I think it's solo.liveview.tv, I believe it is, but you can go.
Yeah, LiveView is a big player in the broadcast space. I mean, they're extremely reliable. They know what they're doing, and their stuff looks great.
Does 4K. That's the other big thing with the new one here.
Yep.
So there's a lot of there's a lot of things on here that we can actually do. So either way, that's something that's coming up here. We're gonna get some of those folks on. But yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Now, you had a product here before we wrap this up here in a little bit. You had a product that you wanted to show.
Yeah, I actually, in full disclosure, have not hooked this up yet, but I waited a year for it, and I know that people have started using them. But this is a Bird Dog NDI player, and what this is if you're not familiar with NDI, it allows you to send broadcast quality video over a LAN connection, right? So in the same building, same studio, having the ability to run an application, you be able to pull up different sources that you're sending out through the NDI protocol. That's kind of the way that would work. This is a box that would allow you to put this on a TV, plug it in the Ethernet on one side, and then an HDMI port here, and having the ability to select what source would look like. So one example for a church might be if you're thinking about, oh my gosh, we'd have to run, 1 million miles of new video cable to hook up all of our television systems, or maybe it's an extended building or something like that. You have the ability actually with something like this to have a physical device to be able to plug into the back of a TV so that you could just use the LAN that you've got, the local area network, to do it with. And it gives you a great ability to have the ability to select different pictures and sources. Like for certain rooms, you may have one signal, certain rooms may have another. But, Steve, we haven't talked at all really about NDI in and of itself, but, it stands for Network Device Interface, I think.
Yep.
And it is an incredible product that came out of New Tech, and it has really revolutionized the video industry. Everything is moving IP, meaning video and audio, over computer wires instead of the traditional XLR and all these other video things we've been used to for years and years. And I know you do a lot with it.
Yeah, I use all my cameras are NDI. Everything in the studio is NDI. Just makes everything easier. I guess that would be the best way to have it over the network.
It does. And NDI is a free suite of tools, NDI tools. If you go, I think it is nditools.tv, that would take you to the webpage. You can download where you get the ability to select different things, from studio monitors to webcams to testing and all kinds of great things. But if you haven't done a lot of research on NDI before you buy into your next infrastructure, or especially if you're building a new building, take a look at NDI and what you think it can do for you, because it literally interfaces with all of the video gear that, vMix supports it. I don't know yet if Wirecast does or not. I'm not familiar with it, but there's a lot of technology that will allow you to interface from the production equipment all the way into the ecosystem throughout the entire building. And even for back walls and things like that, on stage and things, there's a million uses for it. So I think it's really kind of cool and important.
Yeah, I'm always into the new technology. Like when NDI first came out, I was like, a lot of people were switching over to NDI and going, oh yeah, this is the next greatest thing. And I'm like, oh, I still like my SDI. I like my HDMI cables for certain things, of course. And then as NDI got progressively better, that's when
Yep.
I made the switch over to NDI. Now, I still, full disclaimer, I still have the SDI hooked up in the event of a catastrophe, but everything, all the cameras, what you're seeing here, bringing Jeff in, it's all over NDI. And it just makes my life easier when I'm switching and trying to bring in other elements, other cameras, because everything is NDI based, right? Like
Yep.
I could grab my cell phone over there on the desk and open the NDI capture app and show anything. Do you remember what a pain that was, even trying to get stuff like that at the church? Just to pull something up from a phone, somebody had to screenshot it and email it, and now they can just pull it up and be like, "Yeah, check this out," you know.
Yep. And you can add it into anything. Yeah. And it kind of goes hand in hand with another protocol that we were going to talk about called Dante, which is IP audio, just like we're talking about NDI being IP video and audio. And Dante, I think for me, Steve, the weirdest moment was when I actually decided I was going to buy into this a year or two back. And I got the Avio adapter, which 2 XLRs on it, Y adapter going into one little plastic box with an Ethernet cable on it. And I thought, am I really going to trust that I'm going to plug in my cool microphones, and have them sound the same coming through a computer cable?
Yeah.
But that's where we're at. And one of the things that I think holds people back so often is that we're afraid to embrace the uncomfortable, the unfamiliar, and the awkward. And the thing is, if you give it a fair shot, sometimes you'll find out it makes your life twice as easy. And it's much nicer having the ability to control things from a computer screen and monitor them than wondering where the problem is in all your stuff. So
it's a lot easier, especially with finding outlets to plug things in when you can just use a power over Ethernet (PoE). Makes so much easier your workflow. It's so nice.
Let's just I want to make sure people know what that is, because you bring up a great point. The PTZ cameras, these phenomenal cameras, have the ability to be powered and get the signal for the video out of them through one computer cable going in the back. So the power is in the cable, the video and audio are in the cable, and you can run it 300 feet or more, depending on what you've got with amplifiers and things like that. And you don't have to, like Steve said, you don't have to worry about putting in some wall outlet and hiring a construction company or contractor to come in and start putting things up. And it's a hassle. This makes it so much easier, all because of NDI and all because of the way this works with the power of the Ethernet.
Dante is definitely, John Mahoney, he's been after me. He's like, you got to get on Dante and get everything switched over. For me, that's a big overhaul. It's kind of like you switching, anybody that's watching is switching your infrastructure from, say, component to SDI or HDMI or even NDI for that matter. Maybe not as much of a big undertaking as NDI because you're already running an Ethernet cable, but it is something that I do want to go, and there is a cost involved with that, obviously.
Sure.
But if you are interested in learning more about Dante, we, myself and Will Goldie and some of our Dante experts are going to be joining Tech Town Hall, which is going to be coming up the first, I think it's the second week of February, or I want to say it's the second. We'll keep you guys posted. Stay tuned to the socials. But yeah, Jeff, I mean, Dante's a huge commodity, especially with some of our cameras adding Dante into it. So I mean, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with Dante and NDI. Like more and more, I remember 10 years ago us saying, like, you're not going to buy cameras anymore with HDMI or SDI. It's all going to be Ethernet ports, and slowly we're seeing that. That's where it's going.
Yeah, everything. There's the miniaturization of production gear. I started on cameras that were this big, using an iPhone that's this big, but I like one that's kind of this big. And and it's interesting because with all of this, going out into the greater population, there's been a lot more companies involved in trying to make it easier for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Never been a better time to get into video and audio.
Yeah, I think that's about what we got for you guys this week. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, you can send in an email. I believe it's right there on the lower third, salttalk@PTZOptics.com. Maybe what we'll have to do, Jeff, if your schedule permits, maybe next month we'll have to have you come back with Greg and answer some questions over for if people are going to call in and ask some of those burning questions where they can get actual feedback. And I know we have the chat room here, but sometimes it's just easier to get on a phone and talk to somebody, right? And just ask them.
That's it. Yeah.
And
well, with PTZ being based in Philly, I'm sure we're going to get some Super Bowl questions. So,
Oh, geez, you keep trying to throw that a little bit in there. Like
you know how that works.
the Niners should have just rolled over to the Cowboys. We would have actually had a chance to beat the Eagles, unlike them. That was just pitiful.
You know, at this point, I don't know what to say.
It was just bad all around. So, but sorry, Niners fans. It's just how it is. But Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time. You guys want to check out more of Jeff? JeffInHighDef.tv. Real quick, Jeff, show a little bit about what you're working on. I know we were kind of showing it a little bit
before the show. Let me have to grab my VMix here. Before the show, we were talking for a minute, and I do a lot of work in the fire rescue world. If you want to learn about that, if you're part of a volunteer fire system and you're trying to save that station or do recruiting campaigns, check out www.firemedia.tv. And I was just basically, I'm gonna hit my little stinger here because I like it. I built this for a new training I'm doing on fire stations called the SOS Save Our Station, talking about how stations can do more on their own. But this is the studio that I've built in this small part of my house, and I am not the best here on the PTZ Super Joystick, but this is basically the room where I am doing all my training from. So I've got a lot of fire department stuff in it, and I've got a lot of metaphor items up that I can speak to in terms of how how stations can work and do better. I mean, I've come up with this, Steve, we used to fire company, because a lot of stations, just like companies, just like churches, get into this mindset of, well, we can't do that because we used to do it this way.
Yeah.
And so, it's kind of hard for me to drive this thing and talk here, but basically you can see the way the calendar works in places like this, whether it's your church or a fire station. Sunday's the same thing we've always done, all the way down to Saturday's the same thing we've always done. And so it's just one of those moments where where I have a passion for reaching the fire rescue community and the first responder community with servant leadership training and marketing. And it actually goes hand in hand, now I think about it, a lot with the way churches operate. We get stuck in our institutional ways of thinking that are outdated, and then we start fracturing and dying because of it. And so I'm a big believer in the saying, embrace the awkward, get over it and move forward.
Then you can see, like, he built that set, their backdrops that he has set up, mixing in real items into that background. It looks really cool. It looks like you have a fire station right in your studio area.
That's what I'm working on.
It's a lot of work, isn't it? Doing all this.
It is, but it's worth it. It's worthy work. And for those of you who are in media ministry, it is worthy work. And do not think of yourself as being less than or a sidebar to the church. You are actually, in my opinion, the new church. And so it's important for you to have a pastor's vision, even if that's not who or what you are, to be able to set that up for the next generation.
And if you're interested, Jeff does a lot of consultations. If you need some advice on gear, if you need just building your media space out, JeffInHighDef.tv is all. You can get his contact information there. Send him an email. Be like, hey, we want to hire you to help us build out our worship center or our church, and get that all situated. But Jeff, again, I appreciate you coming in here. And guys, since it's the new year, it's always great to talk about that new year. Everybody goes with New Year resolutions, which nobody keeps anyways. So I didn't want to kind of do that, but gear being hot and heavy, I know we all love gear. We all love getting the new stuff and the really cool stuff. And so I figured that's a good thing to talk about, get that out of the way. But next month, bring your questions, get prepared to call in. I think we'll have a good time. Greg will be back. You heard Jeff will be back. Well, guys, we'll see you next week. Or next month, excuse me. I'm so used to doing weekly shows. We'll see you next month.